Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome all over the world. How's it going, everybody? My name is Ludwig. I'm a pianist and I'm a composer. And if you've been following my mini chats, you'll know that over the last, well, since the end of last year, I've been involved in collaborating with a lot of wonderful musicians and pianists on creating a method book, a piano method book for a company called Oclef. Now, the focus of this method book is it's a book that can be used online. And it's a book that can be used with a teacher and a student. And you're taking the student from absolute beginner. And by the time they get to the last book, that's the eighth book, they should comfortably be able to read through this Clementi sonatina. You know the one. Right? So it's a mammoth task, let's be honest, creating a method book. And there are so many wonderful method books out there. And so this edition here is our first edition, our own reflections and thoughts on what we feel would be useful and also fun as a method book. So when I first got the task, I actually came up with this little character called Cleffy. Right, so Cleffy is a caterpillar, and it came about because one of the challenges that students have is intervallic reading. Right, so they're reading from left to right, but they also have to figure out when the notes move up by step, when they move up by skip, and the looking at the music, looking down at the keys can be quite problematic. So to keep things simple, I just put the notes on the body of a caterpillar. And as you can see, right? See, you like the pun, thank you, Dad. Once they understand where middle C is, it's a very simple task, they can also see that Cleffy's body moves up and down by step. And so that's where this concept began. Like, oh, it's moving up and down by step. I don't even need to know what the name of this note is. All I need to see is the movement. Now you guessed it, if you want to add a third note, go and add another third body part. It's a Cleffy. All right, so this was the very basic beginnings of the piece. When I shared this with some of the colleagues, look at what happened. Oh my goodness, colors and illustration, Cleffy was born. And so this was written by one of my colleagues called Dr. Glenda. And it's wonderful. I mean, it's just so illustrated. You can go up and down the keyboard. If you go above the keyboard, the top part of the keyboard, you're in the garden. If you go below, you're below the garden. So much color, so much excitement. But one of the things that was also discussed is that before we get into doing so much of this detail and artistic work, we need functionality. So Colorful Cleffy has to take a little break for a bit. And we go back to creating docs. But thank you, Dr. Glenda, for that. We'll be back very soon. So this is originally where it started then. So I went back to a doc and I just thought, how can I divide up the chapters? And these are the topics that I came up with. Number one, what? What is the activity that's being described? You know, what's the exercise? Number two is where. What's the fingering? What's the location on the keyboard? Understanding the geography, how the keyboard's laid out. Number three, this is my favorite one. This is how. It's how we place the hand on the keys, how we move the hands. And it promotes healthy piano technique. Very important that right from the beginning that we show how the hand can and should move at the keys to do two things. Number one, prevents injury. Number two, it allows the student to explore more varieties of tone and more color. And the more variety of tone and color they have, the more exciting the music is going to be, the more interesting it's also going to be for us. And so this is the doc that I just drew out and creating little explanations for each segment. Then, once I had that, hopped onto MuseScore and I started writing out some musical examples. And underneath each musical example, I just give a description of what's happening. So here, Cleffy learns to crawl and climb up one step. Now Cleffy learns to climb up two steps. Also put the fingering in there. Now let's move on to the next section. So now we have some descriptions. Now we have some musical examples. Boom! Look at this. This is a whole nother talk. This was formatted on a program called LilyPond, where you had to code in the information. Big shout out to Dr. Matthew Bell for guiding me through this and creating all the templates. But this is our first edition. It begins in the middle. On this line, you will see 6 circles as notes. Using your right hand, place finger 2 on C and press it down 6 times. 2, 3, 4. Notice the language. Very straightforward, huh? And this is a book, you have to remember, that's been designed not just for a student, but really for a teacher and a student. A lot of students probably won't read through all this information. So we wanted to write it in a way that it wouldn't make the teacher bored, but it was also very straightforward for the student to understand. So it was quite a challenge to figure out what are the exact words that we need, cut out all the fat. We're still in the process of developing, but this is our best version yet. So now let's move on to this section here. Number 2, one of my other colleagues was saying to me, it's super important actually, instead of introducing the topics for each chapter as you go along, put it all in the introduction. I think that's a great idea. And so when actually creating the book, you know exactly what you're about to get. You know, you've got the menu for the restaurant. Oh, I'm going to be dining on pitch and hand shapes. And then also put in a checklist. Checklist is great because then before they begin this book and they need to know, okay, am I good enough with this book? You can create a checklist here that the teacher and students can go through, nice little fun activity that they understand all these concepts, and then they can move on to the activity. All right. So now we're slowly starting to develop. One of the big things is collaboration. This is such a huge project that needs many different people's input. And so for book 3, I sourced a lot of help from the pianists and the musicians at Oclef, and I gave them different chapters to focus on. So we had the initial chapters that were introduced to all the topics. And then I created this doc that we all shared. And so everything that's in black, obviously, is the text. And then anything that was in blue is a musical example that we wanted to create, or an illustration. Things that were in red, I was going to work with another designer to put in other images that I couldn't quite create. But check this out. So it's a big doc, but along the side are everyone's notes, their thoughts on how to introduce intervals of fourths, how to introduce dyads. What else do we have here? How to introduce the thumb going under 3. All right, should we introduce Fong's cross? Shout out to Thong, it works well with my students, 100%. So this was a really fun process. If we move on to this section over here, once we had figured out exactly what we wanted to describe, I wanted to get everyone to compose as well. So people that were writing the descriptions also wrote pieces. How do you go about that though? Well, this was my first attempt. So creating a checklist. Each chapter, anything that was written in black, were ideas or concepts that had already been introduced. Anything that was in green had to be, it's mandatory. These are the new features that were introduced in the chapter. And so I had to make sure that everyone that had this assignment knew exactly black, you can already use, green, it's mandatory. Also figured out that some of the compositions that came back were breaking the law, and they were breaching some of the concepts. They were too advanced. And so we also put a section in for do nots. So now they have a layout page. Also decided, okay, so how do we divide everything up? And so the best thing was to break them up into groups. So there were 9 pianists, and each pianist was put into a group. So I had a little folder that I could just jump into. And so if I looked into book chapter 1, I see 3 compositions here already. And so by the time that I got to the end and I had all 10 chapters, I had 30 compositions that I could play around with, figure out which ones best suited the chapters, and then we could use those. Now, as we progressed, because there are 8 books, by the time you get to book 6, 7, and 8, you can think about it, there is so much information that had been leading up to that point. And so it was starting to get a little bit confusing. What concepts can we use? What can't we use? So I created another spreadsheet. And this was my spreadsheet going through each of the books and also introducing the topics that could and that could not be used. So this is my first attempt. Yeah, not bad. I was then taught another method of how to create a more pro spreadsheet. Oh my goodness, look at this. And so this actually made things much easier. So the chapters were put at the top, and then anything that could be used within the chapter was marked with an X. So all your subjects were down here. Features that were mandatory that had to be put in, well, were put with a big orange box called feature. So now you as the composer knew exactly what you had to do. You had all of these here at your disposal, anything that was an X, and something that was a feature had to be put in. Now, this was also an important box to be put in as well, parameters that were not allowed. Once again, we wanted the composers to be writing within following a certain criteria. Otherwise, what would happen is students would be playing a piece in chapter 2, move to chapter 3, and now they're playing double six and double thirds and octaves. No, that's not good. It's going to turn them off. So we wanted to keep things on the straight and narrow. Now, I'm going to jump straight to book 8. By the time we got to book 8, we pretty much had found our feet. We knew what we were introducing, and we started also to introduce skills and movements, right? So like hand crossing, repeated notes. And so this made things a little bit more exciting. The students already knew a lot of the theory, and now we were just working on things that are a little bit more showy and a little bit more fun, right? Coordination at the piano. One of the last things that I want to introduce for book 8 is character. And so one of our composers wrote this about her piece. This is really great. She wrote a piece called, oh my goodness, Eschatos. Did I get that right? All right, write me in the email if I got that wrong. Eschatos. Right, it's about a little cat. Her name is Annika Singh, so shout out to Annika. I pictured this piece as quite texturalized and prickly. The main scene I had in my mind was a black cat wandering around the streets at night in a primarily suspicious area. And I love this because this is the first time actually in the whole method book that a composer speaks up about their description of the piece of music. And so as we progress, we're probably going to have a little bit more and more of this so that students who are playing can start to get a real life idea of what the composer had in their mind, and perhaps have some workshops with them. Little plug there, student and composers. Last but not least, I wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Dylan, who wrote this piece over here. Look at this title, Beethoven's Foyer. And so what he's done is he's brought together pretty much as many techniques and textures as possible for the piece. So we've got some Alberti bass. We've got some choral writing. What else do we have here, sir? You got your changing from double thirds, got your third dyads, your sixth dyads, and we finish with triplets. I got to work on my sight reading. Maybe I need to go through this method book. Anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, that's just a quick view of my memoir, my own reflections on creating the method book. As I said, this is our first edition. There's so much more that can be added, but at least now we have a basic foundation of how things can develop. Hopefully this helps for you as well as you create your own method book or you create your own syllabus for your students. We look forward to getting this out there to you. When you try it, please send us through your thoughts and ideas, because we're always moving together. We're always moving together, especially as music educators. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.